Welcome back. In our last video, we had spoken about ideologies and conflict and how the differences between the Soviet Union and the United States led to conflict during the Cold War. I think we had left off with domino theory. So here's what we've got here. If you remember, the domino theory is the idea that if one country is taken over by a communist neighbor, all of the surrounding nations, like the next door neighbors, would be taken over one after another. Just like in the game dominoes, when one domino falls, the rest fall as well. Because of the domino theory, the members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization practiced a policy of containment, where it's blocking the growth and influence of an ideology, in this case communism, by creating an alliance and support from countries in areas of conflict or unrest. So just like we store food or liquids or anything in containers, we're keeping it from spreading outside of the container. So they're hoping to contain communism, to keep it where it is, but to stop it from spreading. So it's blocking the growth or influence of communism elsewhere. Their plan was to do this by coming to the aid of any weaker countries that were hoping to defend themselves against communist neighbors. So any countries of the world that were being influenced or pushed around by communist neighbors, NATO would come to the aid of them with either financial aid or by sending troops to help them fight off communism. A very important event took place in 1949 that led to a lot of Cold War fears throughout the United States and throughout the whole world. And this was that the Soviet Union successfully tested their first atomic weapon. So now the two major superpowers of the world both had atomic weapons. And a competition begins to have the most powerful weapons. This is known as the arms race. Because of the arms race, children across America and even across the world practice duck and cover drills at school. They were practicing this in the event of a nuclear attack from the Soviets. So let's take a look at a short cartoon that children had been shown across America to help them understand why they were duck and covering.
Dum-dum, diddle-dum-dum, there was a turtle by the name of Bert, and Bert the turtle was very alert. When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. He ducked and covered, ducked and covered. He did what we all must learn to do. You and you and you and you. Duck and cover.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about. Duck and cover. This is an official civil defense film produced in cooperation with the Federal Civil Defense Administration and in consultation with the Safety Commission of the National Education Association. Produced by Archer Productions, Incorporated. Hey, Bert, come on out and meet all these nice people, please. Oh, all right. We really can't blame you. You see, Bert is a very, very careful fellow. When there's danger, this is the way he keeps from being hurt. Sometimes it even saves his life. That's why these children are practicing to duck and cover just as you do in your school. We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous. Since it may be used against us, we must get ready for it, just as we are ready for many other dangers that are around us all the time.
Americans not only feared a nuclear attack from the Soviets, they also had another Red Scare where they were afraid that communists might be involved with the American government. One important event that took place is the Rosenbergs, a couple from New York that had worked on the atomic bomb and were confirmed communists, were actually executed for spying and passing secrets about the atomic bomb to the Soviet Union. So they were blamed for how the knowledge of the atomic bomb had fallen into the hands of the Soviets. The Rosenbergs denied these accusations, but because of suspicion and fear, they were executed. For 4 years, between 1950 and 1954, a senator from Wisconsin named Joseph McCarthy claimed that a vast communist network existed within the government. Since he was a member of Congress, people believed these accusations and lived in fear as they watched many government officials be put on trial for claims that they might be communists. McCarthy's untrue accusations ruined the careers of many innocent Americans who were wrongfully accused, and many of them lost their jobs and ruined their reputations. Let's take a quick video that people would have been watching throughout the Cold War that explains how to spot a communist and what you should do if one of your friends might possibly be a communist.
Therefore, propaganda is vastly more important in democratic societies.
In recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it. If a person consistently reads and advocates the views expressed in a communist publication, he may be a communist. If a person supports organizations which reflect communist teachings, or organizations labeled communist by the Department of Justice, she may be a communist. If a person defends the activities of communist nations while consistently attacking the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, she may be a communist. If a person does all these things over a period of time, he must be a communist.
After years of putting his co-workers and colleagues on trial, Joseph Welch, who was an attorney for the U.S. Army, actually had made a famous quote about his feelings towards Senator McCarthy. He said, "Until this moment, Senator, I think I never really gauged your cruelty and recklessness. Have you left no sense of decency?" So he's referring to the fact that McCarthy wrongfully accused dozens of his co-workers for being communists, and many of them lost their jobs and had their reputations completely ruined. All of these differences between the U.S. and the Soviet Union and the fears that existed about communism eventually led to a conflict across the world. It's important to understand that at the end of World War II, the Soviet Union and the United States divided up Korea, which had been a Japanese colony. They divided it into two separate parts. Just like they had partitioned Germany, they partitioned Korea because it had belonged to the Japanese. North Korea practiced communism, and South Korea was to practice a democratic nation.
Korea is a completely different country. Dear Tim and Moby, why is there a North and South Korea? From Edie. Korea was divided at the end of World War II in the 1940s. Before that, Korea had been a Japanese colony for 35 years. A colony is any country that's ruled by another country. In the 1700s, America started off as a colony of Great Britain. In 1945, World War II ended with Japan's defeat. Korea was split in two at the 38th parallel, or 38 degrees north latitude. The northern half was occupied by troops from the Soviet Union. That's the name for the country that combined Russia, Ukraine, and a bunch of other republics. It was officially dissolved in 1991. The Soviets helped establish a communist government like theirs in North Korea. American forces occupied South Korea and established a non-communist government there. Oh, right. Communism is an economic system where all wealth is supposed to be distributed evenly to everybody. It sounds good in theory, but it's never really worked out the way it's supposed to. Communist countries like the Soviet Union tend to become dictatorships. To increase their power, the Soviets tried to spread communism to other countries. America and Europe wanted to stop them. This tension lasted for 50 years after World War II in a standoff called the Cold War. Well, in 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea. North Korean leader Kim Il-sung wanted to reunite the peninsula under communist rule. The U.S. President, Harry Truman, went to the United Nations asking for help in turning them back. A UN force of mostly American troops landed in South Korea a few months later. By then, the North Korean army had taken over almost all of South Korea. But the UN forces, led by the American General Douglas MacArthur, managed to push the North Koreans back in just a few short weeks. First, they got them back across the 38th parallel, and then they pushed all the way north to the Chinese border, which turned out to be a big mistake. China, another communist country, saw the advance of UN troops as a threat to its security. Almost immediately, it sent hundreds of thousands of soldiers to fight on the side of North Korea. MacArthur wanted to extend the war to China, but President Truman refused. He did not want to start World War III. When MacArthur complained about it to the press, Truman fired him. After the Chinese forces recaptured North Korea, the fighting went back and forth. Overall, the war dragged on for another 2 years and cost some 2.5 million lives. It ended in 1953, shortly after the new U.S. President, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, took office. He negotiated a ceasefire with North Korea and China. The peace agreement divided North and South Korea pretty much exactly as they had been before the war. To this day, U.S. and North Korean soldiers guard their side of the demilitarized zone, DMZ, the little tract of land between the two countries. Well, North Korea has grown more and more isolated over the past 50 years. They're not on very good terms with the rest of the world. Invite them to a party and socialize some? That's a nice thought, but I don't think you're being very realistic.
Let's take a closer look at how the events of the war actually played out. On June 25, 1950, North Korean troops invaded South Korea in an attempt to take over the country. Poorly armed, the South Koreans were no match for the North. So we've got the North Koreans invading, and they managed to actually push back the South Koreans to this tiny corner in the southeast of Korea. In order to contain communism, President Truman sent troops to help the South Koreans. Under the direction of General Douglas MacArthur, the South Koreans, backed by UN troops, were able to push the North Koreans all the way back north towards the Chinese border. Keep in mind that China is a communist government at this point. Because of this, Communist China saw the advancing troops as a threat. So hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops crossed the border and drove the UN forces back towards South Korea. The war now became a stalemate, or a situation in which neither side is able to gain much ground or achieve a decisive victory. General MacArthur believed that dropping atomic bombs on Chinese supply lines would lead to a quick victory, but Truman feared that this is going to start another world war. Disappointed and frustrated, MacArthur publicly ridiculed Truman in the press, and Truman eventually had to relieve or fire MacArthur from his command in Korea. In July of 1953, a ceasefire agreement was signed and a demilitarization zone was established to separate the two Koreas that still exist today.